Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast. We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. To further this cause, we give away a product every week that will empower you to get involved in changing your life and changing our world. You can register for our weekly giveaway by subscribing at truthandliberty.net. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to receive weekly updates on guests, news, and much more. This is an interactive live cast, and we welcome your questions. To ask a question during the live cast, use the comment or chat features. Now get ready to dive into this week's topics with our hosts on location in Colorado, USA.
Hello, this is Andrew Wommack. Welcome to our Monday night Truth and Liberty live cast. We've got people joining us from all over the world, all of the states, and tonight we are going to be interviewing the congressman from our district, the U.S. Congressman Doug Lamborn, and he is a blessing, and he's here live with us tonight, so it's just going to be a great time. Before we get into that, let me mention that we want you to participate, and I think it's going to be great to get a perspective of somebody who's actually in the battle there at the national Capitol dealing with this. We're going to be able to ask questions, and so we want you to participate. And I've got Richard Harris with us. He's our chief counsel here for Truth and Liberty, and he will give you all the information and tell you how you can participate.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Boy, I'm excited about tonight. It's going to be awesome. What an honor to have Congressman Lamborn with us. Well, folks, we're really glad to have you with us tonight, and hopefully you're watching the live cast tonight on our website, truthandliberty.net. If you're watching on one of our other platforms like Facebook, we encourage you to switch over to the website, because Facebook has been known to censor us and drop us, and we think your experience will be a lot better if you watch on the website. I wanted to mention some of the events that are coming up here. We have a lot of things going on here at the ministry all the time, but boy, there's some great stuff coming up in the month of August.
You know, let me say before you get into what's coming up, we just got through with the Stand for Truth and Liberty conference here last week, and we had, I don't know, a bunch of speakers. We had David Barton, William Federer, we had a Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, E.W. Jackson. It was one of the best things we've ever had. And I was just told that all of this is now archived on our Truth and Liberty website.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, we loaded it all onto the Truth and Liberty website, and I think there's a special tab or something on there for it. I haven't checked it out myself yet, but you can get the whole thing right there without even having to travel, and it was quite a conference.
I tell you, Bill Federer, I think, was the best I've ever heard him. He condensed 6,000 years of history into 1 hour and 15 minutes.
I'm telling you, it was amazing. So, yeah, check that out, folks. Well, coming up on August the 2nd through the 3rd is the Kingdom Youth Conference with Todd White, Ryan Edberg, and Joseph Z, along with Andrew and others. It's going to be a fantastic event for youth. Healing is here August 13th to 16th, and I'm telling you, there's nothing like the Healing Conference here at AWM and Charis Bible College. We see miracles every time. People getting out of wheelchairs and blind eyes opening, and it's no joke. It's awesome. You come and see the miracle power of God. In God We Trust rally on September 14th, restoring faith, family, and freedom to Colorado. We are so excited about this event, folks. We're going to be bringing the church together here at Charis Bible College in Colorado and connecting believers to grassroots organizations where they can get involved and actually make a difference. You can register for that on our website, truthandliberty.net, and find out more information about our speakers. But it's going to be Andrew and Lance Wallnow, Pastor Mark Cowart. We've got some invitations out to some other high-profile folks, and so it's going to be a great event.
We do have a state senator and a state representative coming, and we have issued an invitation to our U.S. representative, and we hadn't heard back from him yet. But
you're going to put him on the spot there.
Well, no pressure.
He's got a busy schedule, but hopefully he can make it. So, you know, every week here on the Truth and Liberty livecast, we give away a free product to folks who register on our livecast. So we encourage you to register, subscribe for our newsletter on truthandliberty.net. And last week we gave away Lessons from Elijah, one of Andrew's amazing books. I love that book. Randy Wisdom, you're the winner of Lessons from Elijah. And this week we're giving away The Power of Hope, a CD series here by Andrew. I've never heard anybody ever explain hope like Andrew explains it. It's a key to faith, and it's a way to achieve your vision, you know, God's vision for your life. So register and be eligible to receive that. And like Andrew said when we first got started, this is an interactive experience. So you can post your questions or your comments on our chat function on our website, or if you're watching on Facebook, stop watching on Facebook, get over to the website. But if you insist, you can post your questions in the comment section there on Facebook. And also, folks, we want to let you know that we are supported by our viewers here at Truth and Liberty. And if you'd like to give to support what God is doing here, you can do that by texting GIVE, G-I-V-E, to 719-301-2552, or you can just go online to truthandliberty.net/donate. And also, if you would like someone to agree with you in prayer, our trained prayer ministers are standing by, and you can call in at 719-635-1111. And we look forward to agreeing with you in prayer. And with that, Andrew, I'm going to turn it back to you to introduce Congressman Lamborn.
All right, so this is Congressman Lamborn, and you've got a resume here that's 2 pages long. I'm not going to go through all of that, except to say that I've been a part of your congressional district. You were elected, I think, to the U.S.
in 2006.
Yeah, so you've been at this for a while. And from my memory, I think you are consistently voted probably one of the most, if not the most conservative voters. Is that right?
One of the most, if not the most.
Amen. He probably is the most. I just don't know the right way to say this. But anyway, Doug has been a blessing. I've been with him a number of times. Matter of fact, in April, I was privileged to go visit you in Washington, and we ate together up there.
That's right.
And I just appreciate what you're doing, Doug. You're standing and you are fighting this battle. And so we want to ask you some questions about how things are going, because the news media, I heard you say one time when we were out to eat that they don't give you much coverage. They go for the AOCs and the people that are going to be more controversial, but there's a lot of good things happening. We need to hear from you about some of the good things that are happening.
Well, Andrew, thanks for letting me be with your show. Richard, you as well. It's a real honor. I really appreciate what you and your ministry do for the cause of truth and liberty. You do such great things, and I'm amazed to see the great things that you're doing. And this show is just a part of that. Excuse me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold here. But in Washington, there are some good things happening. You hear about the controversial things. You hear about the Democrats, especially in the House, criticizing President Trump all the time. They want to impeach him, but they don't want to impeach him. They're torn between that. They can't really make up their mind. They know it would be bad for them politically because American people really don't want to see that happen. But some of them can't contain themselves. They can't help themselves. Their impulse to tear the president down is so strong within them. And anytime the president says something controversial, they don't know how to handle it. There truly is TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome. And the unfortunate thing about that is they don't want to let him do things that will be considered a victory for Donald Trump. They don't want him having a political standing that's higher because he's done something good. But every once in a while they are drug along kicking and screaming, and they do vote for something good. We did some sentencing reduction recently. We did some opioid crisis funding and legislation, and that was all very bipartisan and was good to do. But when it comes to the social issues, they really are on a different spectrum altogether.
That's what it appears.
A good thing is that if a liberal bill passes the House over the votes of the Republicans like myself who are in the minority right now, but if they have the votes to pass it, the Senate has been basically ignoring those things. They are dead on arrival. I applaud Mitch McConnell for taking that stand.
You know, when I was with you in Washington later that day, I met with Mitch McConnell, and one of the things he said to us, he says, as the majority leader in the Senate, he decides what comes to the floor. And he said he's just determined he's not going to bring a lot of it. He doesn't even bring it to a vote. So.
And that's good for the country.
It is.
And plus, the Senate has done really good work on confirming conservative judges,
Right.
both to the Supreme Court and the appellate court and the district court levels. And that really is going to be good for our country for decades to come.
Well, let me ask you a question, and I know you have to work with these people, and so if what I'm saying is out of line and you don't want to answer it, please be free to tell me. But it looks like, from my perspective, that the Democrats basically are just delaying. There is very little being done. It seems totally dysfunctional, and like that they're beginning to turn on each other. Is that a proper assessment, or what do you feel being a part of that?
Andrew, that is a good assessment. There are some newly elected people who are taking a hard turn to the left. The Squad or AOC, there's different nicknames. There are, and there's more than just 3 or 4. There's a bunch of them that are very leftist. There are also some relative moderates who got elected from swing districts by like 1 or 2 percentage points. They know that even in their heart of hearts, if they want to be liberal, they know the voters won't stand for that where they got elected. So they're trying to be a little more moderate, and they don't like the attention that the hardcore leftists are getting. But the press, being the leftist press that it is in our country, unfortunately, is giving them, showering them with attention and affection, because they are also standing for the press's view of the world, the journalist's view of the world.
So is the news media amplifying their voice? Do they really have the voice that the news media presents, or is this just because it's controversial?
Well, some of it is a strong social media presence that they have, but some of it is the press gives them a lot of time and attention. And sometimes doesn't really nail them down and bring them to account like they should. For instance, the week before, they were accusing Donald Trump of making racist statements, which I think were taken out of context. They were calling Nancy Pelosi a racist. Now, that's their so-called leader in the House, which shows the division that you referred to.
I actually gloried in that. I thought they're getting caught in their own net.
Exactly.
All of this political correctness and the Me Too movement, now the Democrats are reaping their own, the seeds that they've sown, and I'm kind of excited about it.
And on immigration, there's been real divisions on a lot of issues. So basically, as a Republican in the minority, we have to take a stand for what's right, even though the press doesn't always highlight what we say, unfortunately. But also, we're able to stand on the things we did when we were in the majority. For instance, the great tax cuts that are leading to this strong economy. The lowest unemployment in half a century, lowest Black and Hispanic unemployment ever recorded. Wages are going up. The productivity's going up. The economy's going up. A lot of good things are happening, Andrew. And the Democrats can't really admit that, but they can't really undo it either, because they would have to get through the Senate and the White House, which isn't going to happen.
Well, I just saw on the news today that you were a part of a group of immigrants who became citizens today, and you were at this ceremony. And so how does this fit with all the immigration issue and everything? What's your take on all that?
Andrew, it was a real honor. I was in Colorado Springs today at a naturalization ceremony where 41 people from 22 countries became U.S. citizens.
That's awesome.
They were sworn in right there on the spot. I have a daughter-in-law from Ukraine who's in the process of becoming an American citizen. I know how special it is. And somewhere, if we go back in our family tree, whoever we are in America, we came from another country. The native peoples came from another country if you go back way far. So we're all immigrants when it comes to that. I just want people to go through the process who respect the rule of law. Those are the people who are going to make really good citizens. They're going to be hardworking. They're going to appreciate what America is all about. I understand people that come from other countries that are fleeing bad situations, but we have to respect the rule of law. And that's where in Congress we have some divisions, because we have people that don't think that that's very important. Some of them even have said, let's have open borders.
Man.
And that's unacceptable.
So could you give us your take on this? I know that that's a hot issue with me about immigration. How do you feel about building a wall or turning away people who are illegal aliens and that have been convicted in court, and we're just enforcing the law? What do you feel?
Well, Andrew, if we follow the laws we have now, and they could even be made better, but we will have people coming to our country who have skills, or they have a family who will support them if they can't support themselves. They might make investments in our country. We have some pretty good laws on the books which could even be better. But we don't want people coming who are gang members or convicted felons. We want people who want to contribute in a positive way. And if you have open borders, you don't have any control over that. We have some in the other political party. I think they were trying to pander and maybe gain voters in the future is where they're coming from. And that's more important to them than what our society looks like in terms of law and order or respecting the rule of law.
You know, I just saw a thing on the internet 2 days ago where they were going to a college campus and asking people, what do you think about this statement by the president about immigration? And they asked, and every one of them, that's racist. They were mad and upset, and then they told them it was Obama's statement, and they were just shocked.
Yeah.
But when Obama makes it, then it was all okay. But it's just anti-Trump. There is a hatred for him that I've never seen before for
Trump
any other.
derangement syndrome.
There you go.
And Andrew, some of the things that have been said or shown on the press are totally inaccurate. They showed people behind chain link fences because we don't have the facilities we would like to have for people that show up unannounced.
Which is Congress' fault because they've been turning down appropriations.
Yeah, and until very recently, the Democrats were even turning down humanitarian aid. We finally got a bill through that about 2 weeks ago. But the pictures that you saw in the press were from the Obama years.
I heard that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And then some of the things that are being said are flat out untrue. There's no concentration camps. There's no people drinking out of toilets. There's nothing like that.
Where did this come from? How can she get by with saying stuff like this?
The press gives her a pass. They give these people a pass and don't really hold them to account.
That's amazing.
Has that kind of inflammatory rhetoric, you know, it seems like it's contributing to a lot of harm. Last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a guy who attacked the ICE facility in Aurora, Colorado.
Yes.
Hoisted a desecrated American flag and the flag of Mexico over United States Immigration Center. What can we do to correct this situation, you know, to get the right side out there, the right view, the truth?
Well, I like the fact that you all here stand for truth and liberty. We have to keep telling the truth and hope that people respond to that, appeal to their better instincts.
Absolutely. Well,
let me ask you a question about the division. It seems like it's been magnified since Trump came in, and personally, I don't think it's Trump that has caused the division. I think, you know, he said he was going to drain the swamp. I don't know if he's drained it. I think he's lowered the water level so that it's exposed what was already there. But when they were in control, they weren't as militant. I think that they are running scared is the reason that we see so much antagonism and stuff. And again, this is my perspective. You being there in the swamp, what do you think?
It's a really important question. I know in our country's history during the Civil War, we had huge division, brother killing brother, fighting brother. I think in the late 60s, we had real divisions in this country when the Vietnam War was coming down, when people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy were being shot and killed, and people were rioting all over the country. So I think even in our lifetimes, things have been more divided. But it's too divided, but it's a reflection of our country. We are a polarized country. There is a struggle for what's right, and you know, you take something like abortion, for instance. That's a very divisive issue. To me, it's so clear that an unborn child should have the right to live.
Absolutely.
And that when you take that child's life, you're taking a human life. But there are people that don't understand or admit that or believe that. So how do you bridge that gulf? You can try to reason with someone, but there's just a division, a chasm, and a canyon between those two ways of looking at the world, Andrew. And you see that all the time in your ministry.
I believe that this life issue is a good example of what we're talking about, because they have been saying that it's women's rights But when they got, the new Supreme Court justices, and it looked like that Roe versus Wade could possibly be overturned or kicked back to the states, well, then all of a sudden now they've come out and their disguise is gone, and they're actually wanting to kill children after they're born and outside of the woman's body. I think that it was this way all along, but it wasn't exposed the way it is.
Yeah. Andrew, you have, and Richard, you have states coming to very different conclusions in what their law should say. You have some states that are passing heartbeat laws, which I applaud.
Amen.
If the unborn child has a heartbeat, that's a sign of life that should be respected.
Now, you have passed some legislation when you were in the Colorado government about late-term abortion, so you've been standing for life for a long, long time.
Yeah, now in my 12 years in the legislature and 13 in Congress, I haven't changed a bit. I've been consistent the whole time. And you have states like New York that are saying anything goes up until the moment of birth. And then they celebrate that with celebrations after the law passes. They put pink on the World Trade Center or something, or the governor's mansion, something like that, and celebrate that.
Well, the abortion, what's it called? The Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Now, that's been introduced in the House, but it's my understanding the Democrats won't even let it come up for a vote. Is that right?
Richard, that's exactly right.
You were instrumental in that, if I recall correctly.
Well, yes, H.R. 962. It's the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. If there's an abortion that does not succeed in killing the child, thank God, that child shouldn't just be set on a shelf to wither away and die, but should be protected and sustained and nourished and kept alive. And we think that should be law. That should, and everyone, that's a no-brainer. Everyone,
it is.
It seems like anybody, liberal or whatever, could agree with it.
Although Barack Obama wouldn't vote for that law when he was in the Illinois Senate. But we have the Democrats under Nancy Pelosi who are not allowing that to come up for a vote. So a bunch of us are demanding that this be coming up for a vote. When it was my turn to do so, I did, and they turned off the microphone on me.
Wow. How do they justify this, Congressman? How can any person with any semblance of morals think that that's not something that ought to be law? I mean, what arguments are they making?
It's almost like Roe versus Wade is sacred to them, and the right to abortion is dominant over everything else.
This goes beyond Roe versus Wade, though, doesn't it?
It does.
This is a child that's born alive, that under the Constitution ought to have the right to life, right? And I mean, there can't be any disagreement with that.
Absolutely.
So,
but
does this really come down to money?
I don't know what it comes down to. I think it may be different for different people. The governor of Virginia endorsed the concept of, well, even if the child's born, let the parents decide. And that's horrendous.
Yeah.
It is.
There's a gulf in our country. There's people going in one direction and people going in a different direction. And I don't know what can reconcile us, but in the meantime, we just have to stand up for truth and liberty.
Well, how much influence, if I could, how much influence does Planned Parenthood have over members of Congress, especially on the Democratic side?
Way too much. Way too much. And they still get some government grants. We tried in Congress. We did it in the House, and the Senate would not go along with it to defund Planned Parenthood. We have grants being made by HHS, Health and Human Services, to some of these agencies that then give money to Planned Parenthood, or they give money directly to Planned Parenthood, supposedly for women's health purposes. But there's $500 million there.
Wow.
That I think should be cut out of the budget. And the Trump administration is taking some big steps administratively to crack down on that. Even that, though, is a slow process and is not 100% foolproof.
Well, so what's this in the news where we read that the Trump administration is banning Title X funds from going to abortion providers, and it was in the courts, of course, and then the Ninth Circuit 2 weeks ago, I think, or last week, ruled in favor of the Trump administration.
Yes, the most liberal circuit in the country.
Home run in the night.
Home run in the night.
Did the right thing and said the law should, or the regulation should stand. And that's exactly what I was referring to, and you nailed it, Richard. That says Title X money shouldn't go to abortion providers.
Right.
And Planned Parenthood isn't the only provider of women's health care. There are clinics, like 15,000 of them around the country versus maybe 500. Don't hold me to the exact numbers. Planned Parenthood clinics, there's a lot more availability for women who really need that care through local clinics, that some of them get some government money, some are private funded. That's where they can get the health care. So it's not about that.
Right.
Let me go back to, you said that they cut your mic off when you were making something. How can this happen? It seems like that isn't government. You just silence. What's happening?
Well, when you're in the majority, you control the microphones, you control the agenda, you control the flow of what comes to the floor for a vote. You control what comes out of committee.
Really? That doesn't even sound like government.
Doesn't sound like the people's house.
No, it doesn't. So I heard something about that when they voted to censor President Trump over some comments he made to the Squad of Four or whatever, that Nancy Pelosi actually got censored. What was this about? What happened?
Well, she violated the rules of the House by calling the president a racist. And that's flat out in the rules and says not allowed. You can't do that. You can't impugn the motives of fellow members either. But that goes for the president as well. And she violated that. And to his credit, Doug Collins, who is the chairman of the, ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, said, would you like to rephrase your remarks? You know, sort of giving her a pass, giving her a way out. She wouldn't even take that. She said, no, I stand by my remarks.
Really?
So he said, well, let's take her remarks down. And they had to do that, but what the House majority Democrats did right after that is said, well, no matter what the rule says, we want her to continue to speak for the rest of the day. See, that's the penalty if you violate. You can't speak the rest of the day.
Here she is voting on censoring Trump for what he said, and yet she violated the rules in how she presented it and refused to recant it.
Exactly.
Wow. The hypocrisy of that is amazing.
Exactly.
Wow.
Man, I tell you what, this gives the impression to me and probably to a lot of people that government right now is not governing very well.
Yeah. Well, it's become so extreme, hasn't it? I mean, the left has become, like you said, a hard left turn. I mean, it's the difference in worldviews between these radical socialists and just average everyday Americans is becoming where it's difficult to get anything done. Is that fair to say?
Well, right now, that's the way it is. They don't want President Trump to have any political victories, so even some common sense things they're not agreeing to. Anything conservative, it doesn't have a chance in the House.
All right.
And with the filibuster rule in the Senate, that kind of waters things down for what comes out of the Senate. So frankly, a lot of the good that's being done, like Title $10, is being done through the administration, through Trump's administration. And the president has said and done some things that I don't agree with. Sometimes the tone of what how he says things is not how I would do it.
Right. Certainly not.
But when you look at the people he's put in positions of power and what they're doing some really good things. We've had other presidents, Republican presidents, who've promised that they would do some things and never could quite do it.
Right.
Like move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem as one big example.
Right.
Presidents of both parties said they would do that, but they never did. And then President Trump is the one who actually did that.
Well, I think a lot of people are shocked, if not just at what Trump says, but that he actually does what he promised.
Exactly. So the fact that he's doing what he promised, I think, is a commendable character quality and has engendered a lot of loyalty by millions and millions of Americans.
So, Doug, let me ask you, we got the 2020 elections on us before we know it. You've served under Obama when the Republicans had a majority and didn't do anything with it. What's going to happen if, say, for instance, more liberals were elected in 2020? If the Senate was to go Democratic, what's at stake?
Well, it would be bad news for the country if the Senate flipped and became Democratic, and they'd have to pick up 3 or so seats. And then depending on who's in the White House, you have a tiebreaker in the vice president of whichever party that would be, depending on who wins that election. So we would not have good judges being sent. Let's say we had a president in the White House, but a Democrat Senate and House. We wouldn't have good judges anymore. They would be compromised, watered down choices that no one would be happy with. A lot more bills would be debated, not just in the House, but in the Senate, and then sent to the president for signature. And if he made a mistake and signed something bad, thinking, okay, I'll give them this and they'll give me something later, trying to cut a deal, that'd be bad for the country.
Well, I guess the House passed the Equality Act, but of course the Senate didn't vote on it, and Trump would never have gone along with it. But that kind of stuff would be just rammed through if we were to lose control.
Absolutely. The Senate does have the filibuster rule right now that says you need 60 votes for controversial things, but people are always talking about not following that, and so that may not even survive. So if the Senate flipped and we lost, like, as Republicans, 3 or 4 Senate seats around the country, and if the House stays Democratic, then we'd have a whole slew of bad legislation that right now is being killed in the Senate and never sees the light of day.
Well, so much of the good things that Trump has done has been through executive order and stuff, which isn't law. And if we lose the presidency, we could lose all of these advantages. So I'm putting you out on a limb, but what is your prognostication for 2020? Do you think that we're going to see a conservative wave, or what's happening?
You know, that's a great question, and we talk about that a lot. I was sitting next to Karl Rove at a dinner a few nights ago, and I asked him the same question. It all depends on turnout. It depends, you know, we have people that are mad at President Trump, and we assume they're going to turn out to express their displeasure. But we have a lot of loyal supporters, and they turned out in 2016, and he won even though people didn't expect it. So assuming they turn out, then I think they're going to kind of cancel out each other, and then you'll have a few in the middle who will kind of decide everything.
So here's a scenario that I'm thinking is going to happen. I think that the liberals have been traumatized by Trump, that they are so mad, they have gone so far that they've overreacted, they've overstated, they've taken off the disguise. And I'm really thinking that we are going to have a conservative backlash, that all of the people that were in the middle and giving them a lot of credit for doing things, I think that they are going to desert the Democrats, and I'm praying for a conservative majority, overwhelming.
Andrew, if you look at the Democratic presidential contenders,
right,
they have also taken a hard turn to the left. It's not just in the House. And they are advocating things that people wouldn't have dreamed of 4 or 8 or 12 years ago. Barack Obama would have never run on the kinds of things they're doing. Medicare for all, which is really Medicare for none, because it would ruin that system. Forgiveness of all past student loans. You know, how is that fair to the people who paid off their loans? Reparations for blacks, you know, for something happened 1.5 centuries ago.
When they mentioned that, I thought about, what about the 300,000 or 400,000 whites that died in the Civil War, bringing the blacks their freedom? Are they going to pay reparations? Seems like that's enough payment.
Well, there's so much, when you analyze these things, there's so much wrong with them, and yet the presidential candidates on the Democratic side are pandering to the left base of their party and trying to outdo each other in who can be the most radical. We talked about immigration. They want free health care for illegal aliens. Now, if we're not a magnet now, what will become that much more of a magnet if that ever happens? They don't want certain laws enforced. They want to abolish ICE.
Do away with the law.
Yeah.
It's just
open borders.
It's almost like open borders,
Yeah.
and a few have said, did they even agree with that, I think.
Now, I heard one person that tried to figure out Bernie Sanders, I think, giving free tuition, free health care, I forgot what else, but they said it would boil down to like $2,000 per person. This is including children. In a year's time, how in the world could we ever fund something like
Andrew,
that?
that's just 1 or 2 proposals. If you add them all together, it would bankrupt our country so quickly.
Yeah.
You know, free child care, free, you know, everything would be free.
Green New Deal.
The Green New Deal, which destroys the
crazy.
economy. All these things are totally impractical, totally unrealistic, and yet they think it's almost insulting to the intelligence of the average voter to think that people are going to buy this, even if their left base of their party buys it. So when you said there will be a conservative backlash, I think when the average voter starts paying attention, a lot aren't now,
That's true.
and they will next year when the election gets closer, I think those kinds of things are going to be very unpopular.
And I think Trump is going to just have these people for lunch, because he is ruthless. even though he's crass and I wouldn't say things the way he says it, I'd hate to oppose Trump because, man, he'd just cut you to pieces. Here's my last question for you. We're going to take some questions from the people here. But my last question is, are you optimistic that things are turning around, or where do we stand right now?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And Andrew, there are some strong believers in Congress. There's not enough, but there's some strong believers in Congress in both the House and the Senate. There's some in the cabinet. I think that that's a good sign for the future. If we have a lot of young people, I think part of what's happening is we have a lot of young people in this country who haven't experienced the bad times. They haven't. Remember under Jimmy Carter, and maybe you're too young, but
no, I remember those lines.
When inflation was like
I'm older than you.
10 to 20%. You couldn't get a house loan when inflation is 10 to 20%.
Yeah, absolutely.
You couldn't buy a house. You were stuck. There were so many bad things until Ronald Reagan came in and fixed them. We might have to go through that again. I hope not. I don't want to see those bad times. But so many young people are still feeling their way through life and haven't yet formed all of their opinions on what, and they're taken in sometimes by things that just sound good, even if they're totally unrealistic and negative.
You know, the surveys say that the millennials are, I forget, over 50% in favor of socialism, which that's just terrible. They don't have a clue what they're saying. So
if they really knew what socialism was like, in Venezuela, people ate their dogs because they were starving. And then what do they do now? They're the most, they're losing 25 pounds per year per person. Wow. The electrical brownouts were so bad because they can't afford to generate electricity. People who were on dialysis machines were dying.
Wow.
So that's what socialism is.
I heard a man who is for socialism being interviewed on, I think it was Laura Ingram's program, and she says, give me an example of where socialism has ever worked. And he just danced around it, and she brought him back 2 or 3 times, and he wouldn't. And finally, she says, yes or no. And he says, well, it's because they didn't do it right.
Yeah, that's what the communists always say.
But you can't argue the fact that there is not a single example of socialism working anywhere in the world, and people who are advocating that are out to destroy this nation.
A few of them will point to a Scandinavian country like Sweden, who have all, if you look at their history recently, they've backtracked.
Right.
Because it wasn't working.
And I heard somebody else say that, I think it was Norway or one of the Scandinavian countries, it only has like 5 million people in the whole nation. And they've got all of these oil reserves right now that, at the moment things are working. But you can't do that with 320 million people that doesn't have the same oil reserves.
Right.
So it just doesn't work. All right, so man, that's been awesome. Thank you so much for coming and sharing these things. So I bet you we've got a few questions.
We do have some questions. Appreciate these. These are great. Well, we have one that was submitted by email from, I'm not sure how to say your name, sir, Pyatt Vandemark. But the question is, Colorado has approximately 100,000 veterans in the Colorado Springs area. And the question is, do they vote constitutionally conservative? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Being in the 5th Congressional District here in Colorado, I have the honor of having more veterans than any other congressional district in the entire country.
Wow.
Out of 435 districts. And I know these people real well. I was on the Veterans Affairs Committee for 10 years, so I know the issues real well. And my father is a veteran, my oldest son is a veteran, and I have all the respect in the world. A lot of people on my staff are veterans. So I will do what I can to make sure that they get the care and the promises made to them and that are going to be kept like they deserve. And they vote really pretty well. You get some occasional liberals even among the veterans, but by and large, they're very great people who love our country, and they understand what's at stake. They understand national security really well, and they tend to be conservative on the social and fiscal issues as well. And certainly on the national security issues, they get it.
That's gives rise to another question. When Donald Trump ran for president, one of the issues was the state of affairs at the Veterans Administration and some of the horrible cases of patients not getting care and people dying on their watch and things like that. And it sounds like that situation has improved lately. Do you have any news on that?
It's gotten a lot better, Richard. It's still not 100% where it needs to be. We saw problems in Phoenix and other parts of the country, and we made sure to give some more funding. That doesn't always solve problems, but it will help to hire more people. We have also some union rules for government employees that make it hard to let people go, and we had internal rules that did the same thing. So we made some progress there, but not really what you would see in the private sector. So we still have a government bureaucracy with its flaws versus how the private sector would do things. So we have an example of socialized medicine in the VA. Although we have good-hearted people, in fact, I've heard that half of the employees are veterans. We have good people doing their best, but within the government bureaucracy and all the red tape, sometimes you have more restrictions on what you can do than you would in the private sector.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's another question. This is from Michael on chat. How can local elected officials disobey federal law openly? For example, defying ICE, denying ICE access to criminals and get away with it. All these sanctuary laws and that kind of thing. How is that possible?
I have introduced legislation to say that sanctuary states can't get away with it. Colorado wants to be a sanctuary state.
And it's this governor, right?
It's not right that you don't allow your law enforcement people to enforce the law. And if we have a illegal alien who has a criminal record, that person needs to be detained and deported. And it's not safe for us to let that person, and Kate Steinle in San Francisco, we know of the horror stories where we don't do the right thing at the local level, and they don't enforce what should be done with deportation.
Right.
Are you familiar with the situation in Teller County with our Sheriff Jason Mixell?
To some extent.
And the ACLU has filed suit against him because, do you remember exactly how it is? He's trained our sheriff's deputies to enforce the law, I think.
Yeah, he's getting them training so they can help ICE. So like if they encounter, they pull somebody over and this guy turns out to come up as, illegal immigrant or whatever, he's training his deputies to know how to process that guy and get him turned over to federal authorities or lady or whatever.
And so just enforce the law.
Yeah, just enforce.
And because of it, he's being sued by the ACLU.
Let me give credit. We're sitting here in Teller County right now, one of the 5 counties within the 5th Congressional District of Colorado. And I know the sheriff, and he's doing an excellent job. He's one of the few people on another important issue who's enforcing the law like he should, and that is against marijuana.
Yep.
There are
a lot of bust.
There are illegal growing operations that are taking place in houses, and some places around the state, they don't really pay much attention to that. But he knows that it can hurt society if you just let it go, and it can be a cover. We do have more liberal and legal marijuana laws in Colorado than in many states. About 10 have made it legal for recreation. But we were the first to do it and maybe a little farther along. And we're seeing that there are problems with that. So he's doing the right thing in actually enforcing the law. Sometimes it gives cover to cartels or gangs or people that are organized to sell around the country. If they can tell police, oh, no, that's a legal growing operation, you got to leave us alone. And it gives them cover to do a big operation.
Well, can I get your opinion on this? That we have had cartels in Teller County that have been running illegal grow operations, and they have busted a bunch of them. How has this legalization of marijuana affected Colorado? Well, is it something to be emulated and promoted, or what's your opinion?
Yeah, like you, I applaud the sheriff here in Teller County. I think Colorado made a mistake by legalizing it for recreational purposes. And I don't think it's good for young people. Young people are using at a higher rate than in other states where it's not legal.
Yep.
Because it's easier to get a hold of.
And also, we've had the homeless come here from everywhere because they can get dope legally.
You remember the man who shot up the Planned Parenthood clinic several years ago and killed a couple of people?
Right.
He had moved here just right before that from North Carolina, and it turns out he moved here because he wanted marijuana.
And
He
I don't.
wanted access to easy marijuana.
And you know, it's not as bad in Colorado Springs as in like Portland and Seattle and different places. But man, in Denver, I've seen some things that the homeless, it's becoming a major problem. Drug use. So they've had bills up to provide legal disposal for drug paraphernalia because it's becoming so prevalent. And I've also heard that the DUIs are up like 5 times over what they were, and a lot of it is because of marijuana.
Well, and a lot of young people are getting access to it, not just over 21, but high school kids. And
I think that's what
and
Doug
middle
was-
school and middle school and middle school.
Yeah, that the illegal usage among students is way up because they've legalized it.
Yeah. Well, here's another question for you, Congressman. This one is coming from Josiah on chat, and he asks, where can we go to hear or find out the good things getting done in Washington?
You can't go to the liberal media.
Yeah, not to the 10 Spies Network, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, there are some good sites like the Real Clear Politics and Newsmax that I think have some good reporting on what's going on, where you can kind of circumvent talk radio. You can get people that circumvent the liberal mainstream media. I think anytime you can just get around the mainstream media, you're liable to get a more balanced perspective.
Yeah, that's right.
Where do you get your information from?
I get it from a lot of sources, Andrew. Sometimes I want to see what the other side is up to, so I'll even monitor what they're doing. But through my staff, through just being on the ground, through talking to people, I talk to people constantly. With that, the fact that I represent 750,000 gives me a lot of opportunity for that. The emails that we're constantly getting, phone calls. I'm voracious about reading the news. I try to do more of the conservative publications like the Wall Street Journal or National Review. Weekly Standard closed down, unfortunately. I thought they were a good source as well. So just hearing from conservative perspectives is sometimes actually very positive, very encouraging.
Well, I'll throw in here, Josiah, that you can check out the news feed on truthandliberty.net, where we pull from a lot of our favorite conservative sources. Now, a lot of that probably wouldn't be considered good news, but you can also go to the president's website through the White House called 1600 Daily and see what's going on through the administration. Maybe the Republican caucus in the House ought to have its own 1600 Daily or whatever your address is at the Capitol, but let people know what good things are going. That'd be great.
Yeah, I get that 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Daily, and that's really good. Before we leave this, you mentioned at our stand conference last week about people possibly getting people together to watch the Truth and Liberty broadcast every Monday and then talking or praying about it afterwards. And I think that this is really a great idea, and I'd like to suggest that for people watching, that you could actually start inviting some friends over. And we've had up to 80,000 people watch this broadcast. If everybody just invited 1 or 2 people over, we could put this into the hundreds of thousands in a very quick time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we can talk here about national issues, a little bit about what's going on in Colorado, but you know, what's going on in the ground in Pennsylvania or Oregon or Arizona, we don't have access to that, but you guys do. Invite some of your friends over and watch Truth and Liberty, and then share with each other what's going on the local level. And that's where we're able to make a real difference, is to get involved in our communities, our school boards, our city councils, and places like that, and really begin to let your voices be heard and make a difference.
Amen.
Yeah.
Got another question, Richard?
Yeah, we do. Let's see here. Here's one about don't take this one personally. Can anything be done about those who've been in Congress 30 to 40 years and now are doing nothing but obstructing? I know that doesn't describe you at all.
Well, I think that people need to show up and vote.
Yes.
There's a sleeping giant out there, and that is the conservative people of this country who don't really get engaged like they could. Either they're too busy or they think their voice won't make a difference. It does make a difference. And when conservatives and churchgoers rise up and vote, amazing things happen.
Boy, I tell you, you know, Congressman, I know you're a believer and you're co-chair of the Values Action Team, and, you know, I'd like to have you comment on that. But if you could speak to Christians out there who, you know, might be listening and they vote once in a while, just, you know, I know that in 2016, the evangelical vote was the determining factor by some analysis of what gave Trump the victory in that election. How important is it for Christians to vote?
Richard, it's extremely important, and great things happen when people of faith are active and engaged. It starts with registering to vote and then showing up on election day or mailing in your ballot before election day. It can be as simple as writing a letter to the editor, you know, email or snail mail, whatever it takes. Speaking out at work or at school, saying, you know, you say that, but have you considered the other side? Those kinds of things are important for people of faith to do, so that when you hear this constant drumbeat from the mainstream media, where they're trying to convince you that that's all there is, you know, everyone dislikes Donald Trump. That's one of their mantras.
I don't.
Well, if people don't speak up, some people might buy into that because that's what they hear from the press, or that's what they hear from Hollywood, or that might be what they hear from their professor at a liberal college, unlike Harris College. So it might be something that they're hearing without the opposite side. So we need to speak up and show that opposite side, so that, so it'll stretch their mind and they'll think about both sides.
Right.
Do you have statistics like from your own elections, what percentage of the registered voters vote, and what, you know, how many people put you in office? You said there were 750,000 in your district. What percentage of those actually participate?
You know, don't hold me to these exact numbers, but I'm going to say maybe 200,000 vote at the end of the day in November in the general election. Maybe up to 300,000. But when you leave out those that are under 18 who can't vote, it could be as much as 600,000. So it's roughly 50 to 70% of the people out there who have the right to vote who actually get around to voting.
Well, that's higher than what I thought. I thought it was much less.
Colorado has a maybe better turnout than a lot of states.
Well, you're also in a conservative district because of the military is one of the big things and stuff. But man, from what I understand, I heard a statistic that in the last presidential election, I think there was 25. It may not have been the presidential, but anyway, the last election, 25 million Christians nationwide did not vote. And I just think that's irresponsible.
What would happen if they all turned out and voted?
Well, I saw a study that the difference between voter turnout among people who identify as religious between 2016 when Trump won and 2018 when the Democrats took the House was the Jewish vote remained about the same, the Catholic vote remained about the same, the Protestant vote, the mainline Protestant stayed about the same, but the evangelical vote dropped by about 20% or more. And I think that has got to be a major contributing factor.
And that was the 2018 election?
That was 2018, last year,
Yeah, because they just vote when they think something's on the line. But you know, one thing, I think you mentioned this earlier, that the liberals are so incensed and so mad that they're turning out.
Right.
They are motivated, whereas Christians, you know, we're thinking about heaven and we're having a great time enjoying our life. We aren't as motivated sometimes.
And you know, Andrew, there's a lot of wisdom to that. I've thought about that many times. We know that there's an eternity. We know that there's a life hereafter. And so our hope is not in the world. Now, we want to make the world a better place. We want it to be the best place it could possibly be. But it's not like that's our only hope and that's all there is. But to someone who doesn't have God and doesn't have faith, this is all there is.
I think they're more motivated, whereas many Christians are putting their efforts into church and into maybe praying for their family and different things like this. But man, the liberals, it's all about politics, trying to change and force their values on us.
Absolutely. Well, Congressman, here's another question. We have a few minutes left. This one is from Cowboy on chat. He says, Congressman Lamborn, could you please speak to the issue of spending He said, well, I appreciate all the good things that are getting done. How can we achieve lasting freedom while monetizing our debt? Are we on a trajectory to hyperinflation of our currency? Would you like to comment on that?
Boy, that is a great question. That's maybe the most important question anyone could ask today. In fact, in Washington, they want to raise the debt ceiling limit again. And we are spending too much. A lot of the national budget, a lot of our spending is on automatic pilot, and we've tried to get that under control. When the House was under Republican hands, we did some things like we were going to put Medicaid on block grants, so let states determine the priorities. But by one vote, this was part of Obamacare, Senator John McCain didn't vote for it, and we lost it by one vote in the Senate. And we wouldn't have just gotten rid of Obamacare, but we would have reformed a major welfare entitlement program, Medicaid. Yeah. So that was a tragedy on many levels. And if we don't get the so-called mandatory spending, the things that are on automatic pilot under control, and President Trump needs to come around on this. He's got many good qualities, many good policies. This is one where he needs to come around and hasn't yet. And so it's the big three: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And because that's about 60% of our budget.
Yeah, amazing.
So yes, let's pay attention to all the part of the budget. I'm a big supporter of military spending, but even there, we got to make sure those dollars are spent as efficiently as possible. We need to finish the audit. They've started, but we need to finish the audit on the military, the DOD. But we need to get the 60% that's entitlements under control. And until that happens, we will be in a situation where we might have controls imposed on us at a time and at a place not of our own choosing.
And all of the Democratic presidential candidates are wanting to increase entitlements exponentially.
Geometrically.
I mean, it's unsustainable now. And I do agree that this is a ticking time bomb. At the moment, the only reason that's not my number one issue is just because we may not even have a nation. It could be socialist if we don't win some of these other things. But the debt is a major deal. You cannot continue to kick that can down the road.
I did see a news report that people inside the White House are sending signals that in the next cycle that there are going to be major spending cuts pushed by the White House. So whether that's going to get any traction or not, we'll see. But with the Democrats in control, it's probably futile. But
and yeah, if a Democrat is in control of the White House, Katie bar the door.
Man. Well, I'm just praying in the name of Jesus that we're going to see a conservative backlash. I really feel good about that. And
I agree with that.
I can't say thus saith the Lord on it yet, but I really feel peace about that. I just think that the left has gone so far. It's like a rubber band. You can only go so far before, people are going to go the other direction. They just can't tolerate this.
That's right.
So, Doug, we sure appreciate you being with us. We're just about out of time, and we do thank I just went blank. Who is it that broadcasts us?
Oh, that's CTN.
CTN, sorry. Thank you, CTN, for carrying this on your network. And the rest of you, thank you for joining us. And I tell you, this has been really good. And also, you can go to our website, and you can see all of these archived things. And I would really encourage you to go check out that Stand conference, Stand for Truth and Liberty, that we had last week. It was some of the best stuff I have ever heard in my life. I tell you, it would keep you going for a long time chewing on those things.
Absolutely.
It was really
awesome.
good. So again, thank you for being with us, and thank you for taking a stand. Do you feel the prayers of people for you? Or?
Yes, I would ask all of your viewers who believe in prayer, hopefully that's every single one of them, to pray for me and other members of Congress, House and Senate, and in the administration. We need prayers. The Bible says to pray for those in authority.
Yes.
And if we're not Christians already, ask for our salvation. If we are, that we would follow the Lord, resist sin and temptation, and follow the Lord and be faithful to Him.
Well, thank you, Doug, and we do pray for you and believe that God has given you wisdom. Thank you all for being with us. Thanks CTN again for broadcasting this. And remember, we do this every Monday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So join us, call some people together, and do a Truth and Liberty Club. We would love to have you. God bless you. Good night.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net. Truth and Liberty is viewer supported. If you'd like to help us continue our live casts, you can make a donation at truthandliberty.net or by calling our phone center at 719-635-1111. Our prayer ministers are there to help you with your donations and to pray with you.